In Kennesaw, we are fortunate to have a leader who is not only involved in the welfare of the city, but is also deeply passionate about its history. It is now my honor to introduce to you the Mayor of Kennesaw, Mr. Mark Mathews.
Thank you, Richard, and good morning again to everyone. You know, having lived in Kennesaw my entire life, I'm pretty familiar with this history, but for those of you who might not be as aware, I'd like to paint a picture for you. Life in Big Shanty in the 1860s was centered on the railroad. The name Big Shanty came from railroad speak. Shanties were the temporary housing for the railroad workers, and big came from shortening the term big grade, referring to the track level. Because the railroad provided convenient transportation for people and supplies, Camp McDonald, a training camp for soldiers, was established in Big Shanty. But a basic conflict between North and South over states' rights and slavery was about to change everything as hostilities broke out in April of 1861. The Civil War had begun. 150 years ago today, if you were standing at this spot, you would have been a witness to one of the more dramatic events of the Civil War. The tale has become legendary. A band of Union spies led by a civilian, James Andrews, stole the general right out from underneath the nose of its conductor, crew, passengers, and a group of Confederate soldiers from Camp McDonald. The raiders headed north, determined to do whatever they could to prevent reinforcements and supplies from reaching Chattanooga. They were eventually captured, and several were executed as spies. Some of Andrews' raiders became the first recipients of the Congressional Medal of Honor. 2 years after the chase, the fortunes of Big Shanty took a different turn. Union troops, under the command of General Sherman, captured and used us as a supply base, hospital, and headquarters for their forces. In October of that year, the town changed back to Confederate hands briefly, but by November, Sherman issued orders to destroy the railroad, and the town lay in ruins. Recovery was slow, but the railroad continued to play an important part in our history and growth. Our next milestone occurred in 1887, when the city was renamed Kennesaw and was officially incorporating it, making the year 2012 doubly significant as we celebrate our 125th anniversary of our charter. From the early 1900s until today, Kennesaw saw its share of bad times and good, difficulty, and prosperity. Through it all, our founding families demonstrated the strength and resiliency we see reflected in their families today. We wouldn't be thriving, progressive community that we've become without their loyalty and contributions. This event today is all about honoring our past. Why is our history so important? There are many reasons to remember the Civil War. The war reshaped how the United States was and is defined. It showed the strength of the American democracy by keeping our young country together through its toughest time. It fostered the rise of a collective American economy and led the way for industrialization. There were many lessons to be learned, lessons about sacrifice, about patriotism, and especially about forgiveness and healing. Those lessons are still relevant, regardless of what side of the Mason-Dixon line or even the Mississippi River we live on. The famous quote from George Santana sums it up: "Those who cannot learn from history are doomed to repeat it." The story of the Andrews Raid is a very compelling story, so much so that Hollywood couldn't pass it up and brought it to life in the 1956 Walt Disney movie, The Great Locomotive Chase. But it's more than that for us here in Kennesaw. It's personal. It's our story. It all began right here. It's a piece of our history that we remember, we memorialize, and we honor. We're very proud that the essence of that event has been captured in exhibits, photos, and video that is now an integral part of our own Southern Museum. If you've never been, or even if you have but it's been a while, stop by the Southern Museum today, see the General up close, and best of all, enjoy the free admission. Thank you for joining us today in recognizing an event that's part of our legacy that shaped our city. We will work toward using the lessons we learned from our past to forge a future bright with promise. Thank you very much.